What is up, guys? Fado82 coming at you with a commentary video talking about the nature of PvP in Rust, but also PvP in general. What you're going to be taking a look at right now are footage from two different games that might seem very dissimilar, but in actuality they're very similar in nature. You're going to be looking at some leftover footage that I had from Rust, which I couldn't put into a full video, and also some old school footage from Ultima Online, which is a game that I played back in the day, one of the first games that I got into that had a lot of PvP involved with it. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of talk a little bit about the nature of PvP. There's a lot of debate going on right now with Rust about should players be able to kill players on site? Should there be safe zones? Should there be some type of systems in place? So I'm going to go ahead and get into that. Let's start with Ultima Online because I think that's sort of where my background comes from, and it's where I have to sort of start to inform where I am today with my thoughts on it. So Ultima Online is a game that came out in about late 1998, 1999. At the time, I was a young kid in high school. I'm 31 now, guys, so I'm a little bit older, so I have some different perspectives on things. But in terms of Ultima Online, it was the first game that I experienced that had virtually unrestricted player versus player elements to it for a little while. And then the developers absolutely ruined the game by trying to appease too many people, too many different populations, and the game became an absolute pile of trash. But during the first few years, Ultima Online was an experience like any other game. And players have tried to replicate that. They've been looking for something like that for a long time. And for me, the first game that gave me the same thrill and feeling of Ultima Online was Rust. It took that long for a game to really hit me on that level again. So in terms of Ultima Online, there were safe zones in the game, but there were just a few towns, and they had NPC guards that were very powerful. So if you mess with people in those zones, you would get fucked up, and that was pretty much a safe haven for people. Other than that, in Ultima Online, if you wanted to go out and start your adventures, mining ore, going into dungeons, doing whatever it is that you may want to do, it was kind of like the Wild West. You were out there outside of the towns, and you could build houses out there, you could mine ore, chop trees, interact with players, go to dungeons, anything you could do in that type of a game. But you're also at the danger of being killed at any point in time by a player or a group of players, a clan, and it was magical at that time because it was a sense that you had of when you left the town of always being on edge, being alert. The risk and the reward was very great because if you died, you lost everything. Just similar to Rust, I mean, you could be mining for 2 hours and have this high yield on you and come back and get ganked by 3 guys who were hidden in the field or something. And while that was very frustrating, there was a certain adrenaline rush that came with it, and it was a very visceral and intense experience. Now, ultimately, Ultima Online is a good case study because when we talk about Rust and these different systems that people want to put in place, like safe zones on beaches or systems where players are flagged for being player killers if they have too many kills, Ultima Online tried doing that, and they ended up destroying the game. They actually tried to appease both the player versus player population and the PvE population at one point. They created 2 different worlds in the game, and that absolutely ruined the game. And now the game is just sort of a empty shell, a husk of what it used to be. There are old school shards out there that you can play on. But anyways, I'm not going to digress too much into UO. UO also did things where initially when you built your house, you could let anybody in. Players could run into that house, and later on down the road they had like lists that were privileged lists. So if you weren't on the list, you couldn't go in the house. And all that stuff kind of sounds okay, I guess, but in practice, in theory it sounds good, but in practice it was bullshit because it restricted your ability to do things. So it's just not really natural. It doesn't really feel, I guess, like part of the world when there's this invisible force field. You can't come into my house unless I put you on this magical list that'll allow you to walk through the door. I didn't like that. And I also didn't like the ability to have to flag a player for PvP and ask their permission to fight them or to do anything like that. Now, Rust is similar in that it has right now that feel of the open world PvP to it where you can be attacked at any point in time, you can attack somebody at any point in time, you can break in their houses, there's not these restricted safe zones, and I'm in full support of that. I don't want to see that change. We're going to be doing an interview later tonight on Play Rust Public Radio, which you guys probably won't hear till next week, but a few of us are going to get together and talk about the nature of killing people on site, the nature of PvP, what some thoughts are on it. But my thoughts are I don't want to see it restricted. I don't want to see systems put in place where players are flagged for being player killers or they're somehow lighting up a different color. I am in full support of the way that Rust is now with its PvP, and while that can be frustrating at times and while it's annoying to get griefed, if you put too many systems in place, you're going to ultimately break the game. So if there's a notion of a system where, you know, player killers are lighting up a different color, or they're somehow being called out differently, or if beaches were a safe zone in Rust, which some people have talked about, it's a bad idea. It would ultimately break the game if there was a beach. I mean, it's going to create situations where people are just standing in the safe zone, taunting other people. It just gets silly. And Rust, I think, was always meant to be a hardcore experience. I'm not sure if Gary or the Rust team played Ultima Online, but I have sort of a thought that maybe they did, because it's so similar. Even if they didn't, they captured the magic of UO in a way that no other game has since. And to a certain population, that's very, very appealing. Rust is probably not going to be a game that appeals to a massive audience like a World of Warcraft game or something. It's going to be more of a niche game, but I think the people that Rust appeals to are going to be people who want that hardcore PvP experience. While that can be frustrating, it comes with it great reward, and Rust engages players on a very intense level where your adrenaline is pumping during these interactions. If it was a system where you could die and respawn with all your gear, or you know, people couldn't attack you unless you gave them your permission, all that would be lost and the game would not feel the same. The magic in Rust is really in its ability for you to be able to do pretty much anything you want at any given time. To restrict that, I think, would ultimately break the game, and I hope the developers don't go in that direction. I have a feeling that they're not going to, but Rust and old school Ultima Online are very similar, and very few games can capture that visceral sense of being afraid of other people, which is a very primal experience, and I think Rust has done it really well. So guys, those are my thoughts. Tune in to Play Rust Public Radio later. As always, Fado82, peace.